Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here for our rezoning meeting. We're, as usual in our school system, we have many things going on, and so, but we're glad you're here for this meeting. One thing I learned from many years in education is when you have difficult decisions and big decisions, then you need to get the folks in the room that those decisions are going to affect most, and you need to get your leadership team, and we have our leader here tonight, and our superintendent, Dr. Kathy Murphy, is here tonight to speak to you about our rezoning. So with this time, Dr. Kathy Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. G. I appreciate that very much, and I want to echo what he said, and that is thank you so much for making tonight a priority. Let me have all my administrators stand. We have a number of our school administrators. Let's give these folks a hand. They've had a long day at school, and they're here with us tonight. And we have a number of our teachers. If you're a teacher with us, we have any of our teachers that are with us. If you'll stand. So thank you so much. So thank you very much. We've had 4 community meetings so far, and this is our 5th meeting. And so delighted that you're here and so interested to hear from you. But prior to that, I'd like to take a few minutes. And how many of you have already been to one of the community meetings? Okay, sorry, you're going to have your repeat. So if you'll bear with that, most of our meetings have sounded very similar because it's the same message. So if you'll forgive that, let me share a few things with you. And first is, why are we rezoning? So this question comes our way frequently. So why are we rezoning? And I want you to understand that there are a couple of reasons why we're rezoning. The first has to do with, I want to share the student enrollment growth with you. So since 1988 to present, so we're looking at 5-year increments here. We started our school district in 1988. So first year, 1988, 1989, we had 5,243 children that started our school district. As you look incrementally over time, you see 1990, 6,100 children, 1995, 8,200, year 2000, 9,700, 2005, 11,700. 2010, we went to 13,171, and currently our enrollment for 2015-16 is 13,856. So as you know, this comes as no significant slide to you. We're growing. We have grown. And so as we've grown, one of the things that's happened is that some of our communities have become disproportionate in terms of numbers. So some of our schools have become significantly larger by population, and other of our schools have declined in population. And I want to show you some of that information. So if we look at the Spain Park High School feeder zone, if we'll think of it in that way, I want to share with you some school capacities. And so, so if you'll see our schools, I wanted to share with you what we call maximum capacity and also the optimal capacity. Maximum capacity is we really don't have another seat in the house. We can't put another kid there. We're maxed out, so to speak. The optimal capacity means that this is probably a good place to be, good utilization of our space. We're not overcrowded. There's a few seats to be had in the house, if you will. And so then we share with you the 2015-16 enrollment. And then we show you what percentage of that maximum capacity that enrollment represents. And we've highlighted the far right column because perhaps this is the most significant column, which says to you what is the percentage of optimal capacity. And so when we look at the optimal capacity in our schools that feed into Spain Park High School, Greystone Elementary is at 80.4% optimal capacity. Still some chairs and seats in the house. River Chase, by the way, I think Dr. Wheaton is coming. I believe she had a meeting this evening. We have River Chase, Dr. Turney. I believe maybe I saw Dr. Turney. Her school is at 96.4% optimal capacity. Rocky Ridge, Dr. Uswate, her school is at 95.9. Then we have Shades Mountain. Kara Scholl, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I'm getting shades wrong here. Julie, please excuse me. Julie Feltham, thank you so much. And then Berry School is at 99.1, Berry Middle School. Dr. Chris Robbins, I know Dr. Robbins is here with us. And then Spain Park, Larry, thank you for introducing me. They're at 88.1%. So, not bad stuff. We still have a little bit of wiggle room in most of our schools. The one closest to any sort of capacity is Berry Middle School at 99. About 10 seats, if you will, remaining between our enrollment and what we would consider the optimal. I share that with you just so you see the numbers and see some of the things that we're studying as it relates to enrollment. And so that doesn't look so bad, right? Let me show you the Hoover High School feeder zone school capacities. And I won't go through all of the non-highlighted parts, but let's jump out to the optimal capacities of what's happening on the west side of our city. So what you see is Bluff Park is at 108.3% capacity. We have Deer Valley that's at 106.8. We have Green Valley at 80.4% capacity. Gwynn at 91.2%. South Shades Crest at 96.6%. Trace Crossings is at 60.4%. Rocks Gap is at 83.3%. Bumpus is at 67.7%. Simmons is at 70.1%. And Hoover High School with almost 2,900 students is at 97.6%. So you have a little bit of a different conversation, if you will, that's going on the west side of our city versus what we're experiencing in the feeder zone that goes to Spain Park School. This is not a great visual, but one of the things that I want you to know is that we are not just, and this sort of came out of our Bluff Park meeting, our meeting that we had on Tuesday night with Bluff Park and other schools in that area. I want you to know that we are not just sitting back, not looking at projections for future enrollment, future developments. We've had opportunities to talk to Bob House, to Tim Westhoven, Signature Homes. We're engaging all these entities into conversations because we realize that it's not just like it is today, because there's no moratorium on buildings. We understand that there are multi-family complexes that's going to be built. We understand that there are single-family home dwellings that are going to be built. And this is one of the projected apartment developments that's here in our city. This is, it remains at this point undeveloped land, but it's zoned for apartments. And this is a property that's on 459. I apologize, the visual's not great. But we're aware of that projected apartment piece. Right now, that piece is zoned to go to the west side of town. Again, that side of our community that's quite overcrowded. Let me then share with you our next slide. And that is to let you see that there is anticipated future housing growth. Not that that comes as a surprise to you either. And we're looking at that housing growth by our current elementary school zones. I have highlighted Rocky Ridge, Greystone, and River Chase. Our other schools in this feeder zone did not show any growth. So if you would just look at 2016 for Rocky Ridge, anticipated 35 homes being built, or well, let me just say homes or dwellings. Greystone with 21 and River Chase with 7. So based on the feedback we have about any potential growth here, you're not seeing significant growth in 2016, again, as it would relate to this particular part of our community. We've carried that out for a 4-year look for you to see what that looks like over time. And if you have any questions, please, we'll do our best to answer those. I know we have a few folks from the city that may be with us and some of my staff who are studying this with us. Let's look at what's happening, anticipated future housing growth by the current elementary schools. And we just wanted you to see the names of these particular locations may be important to you. Just thinking about a Rocky Ridge deal, we have the Kirkman Preserve that's going to impact you in 2016, and when the preserve's going to impact Greystone, and Danbury, and Trace Crossings, the Trace Crossings developments, Bridgewater, Hidden Valley Apartments, the Grove, and at Deer Valley, Ross Bridge, Lake Cyrus, and McGill. And if you know that we've missed something, I certainly would ask that you share that with us. What I want to share with you is that we get it. We understand that just because we show you numbers today, we're not naive to the fact that growth is continuing. Multi-complex apartments are being built, single-family dwelling homes are being constructed, and we're going to study all of that, and we're going to look at all of that, and yes, all of that impacts us as we create and draft a rezoning plan. So one of the reasons, the primary reason that we're looking at rezoning is because we have some of our schools over 100% optimal capacity, and we have other schools that are pushing 60% capacity. So that means not only do you have a disproportionate number of students around the district based on schools, but when you think about the utilization of space, you have some spaces being maxed out, if you will, and other of our schools that are frankly being underutilized as a result of the population of students. But there is a second reason, and this is a very secondary reason. This is not the primary reason. The primary reason is we're looking at numbers, we see where we are, we see we need some distribution of our students. But the second is that the Department of Justice is working with us because our school district desires to acquire unitary status. When we pulled away from Jefferson County, we didn't pull away from the desegregation court order. So even though we removed ourselves from Jefferson County was under the desegregation court order. When we withdrew from them, we withdrew, but we brought the desegregation court order to us too. So in the process of trying to relieve ourselves of that court order, and in order to gain unitary status, there's some things we have to do. Now we can like it, not like it, fuss, kick, stomp, throw a couple of things, but at the end of the day, there are 6 what's called green factors that we have to meet as a school district. And those green factors, green comes from the lawsuit, the law case, green being the last name involved in the lawsuit. But they're looking at 6 factors here in our school district. They're looking at transportation. Now, when we talk about the Department of Justice is concerned and interested in all children. But the Department of Justice predominantly is concerned about the African American children in our school district, and is there anything that's going on in our school district that disproportionately impacts them in any kind of negative way? And so think about transportation. Our school board has chosen to take the fee-based transportation piece off the table. We did that not because of the Department of Justice. We did that because we believed that was in the best interest of our students as a whole. We didn't want the children who perhaps could least afford to pay to get on that bus to be the ones that were disproportionately impacted by the cost to get on that bus. So philosophically, we chose to take that off the table. In doing so, the Department of Justice was pleased with that decision, but we did that for our children, but I'm tickled, they also like that too. We do not have any situations where we're transporting our children who are of color a longer distance, further away, and impacting them in any negative way as it relates to transportation. Because of that, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get partial unitary status in the area of transportation. I'm also very hopeful that facilities-wise, we're going to be able to get partial unitary status. Walk in our schools. They're awesome. Sure, those of us who own homes, pieces of property, there's always a wall that needs to be painted or a light that needs to be replaced. There are always things that need to be done, but we have really great facilities in our school district, and we do not have a situation where we send children of color to one school that is poor roof, bad doors, windows broken out, and other children are not going to school. We don't have those schools. So facilities should be an area where we're okay. Clubs and organizations, we should be okay. We do not have any clubs and organizations where you have to be of a color in order to get into that club or organization. Beta Club, National Honor Society, Yearbook. We don't have that disparity in letting our students be parts of clubs and organizations. So those first three green factors, I feel very comfortable about, and I'm very hopeful that we will get unitary status in part based on those three green factors. Where we may have a little bit more of a struggle is going to be in student assignment, staff assignments, and faculty assignments. So student assignments is where our students go to school. Do we have a preponderance of minority children going to one school versus another school? Another thought behind student assignment is, do all of our students have an equal opportunity to have advanced placement, dual enrollment, international baccalaureate? And the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. But the question then becomes, then why do we have a fewer number of those students who are actually in some of those classes? Why isn't there a proportional representation of minority students then in some of those classes? And the Department of Justice would like for us not only to make sure that we're doing a great job preparing all students, but that we're actually reaching out and encouraging and supporting children of color to take any and all advanced classes and other opportunities. And then you have staff assignments. Where are our staff assigned? Do we have a preponderance of minority staff versus more of a Caucasian faculty assignment? So do we have more certificated white teachers versus more staff who are minority? These are the things that the Department of Justice is looking at. And again, you know, whether you like or you don't like, or you feel like the long bony finger of the Department of Justice is all up in our business and they need to get it out of our face, you know, we can have that conversation. But at the end of the day, these are the green factors that we must address in order to get unitary status. And we want to acquire unitary status. When we acquire unitary status, that takes them out of our school district, so to speak, out of our business. They will not be in and out of our school district questioning the decisions that we make for ourselves that we know and believe are in the best interest of our children. So the 6 green factors, the Department of Justice is really a secondary reason why we're looking at rezoning. Jason? So let me just, before I turn the mic over to you, let me say that we have a fairly ambitious plan for pulling this together. I am very hopeful that as of school year 16-17, we will have a plan that will work for us as a school district. But I also realize that this is November. And I will say to you that I do not have a plan in my desk drawer, and as soon as I come out and do dog and pony shows with you, I'm going to run to my office, regardless of what you think or say, and go pull my plan out, and voila, I've got it. I want to hear from you. We've had 5 community meetings for the purpose of hearing from you. We want to hear the common threads and the common conversations so that to the greatest extent we can, we implement and integrate those conversations into our plans. So tonight is the last of this round of community meetings. I am out just as fast as I can get into our schools, having faculty meetings. Had a faculty meeting yesterday morning at Spain Park. Yesterday afternoon, I was at Hoover High School. I'm out meeting with our faculty so they have a voice in this process. We're coming to you because we respect you, we want to hear from you, but I'd be absolutely remiss not to go to our people and say, what are your thoughts and your ideas, and you help us look at this. So we'll begin in earnest now after we have this meeting to start to use a system called GIS, Geographic Information System. The city has some folks who are working with some of our people. Jason Gaston, our media public relations person, has been through some training. Dr. Juan Dotson is doing some of that training. Department of Justice has the GIS system. And what's really nice about that system is it allows us to look at Spain Park High School students that our school profiling system feeds into GIS. So that system knows exactly where these where Spain Park High School students live. It also knows the racial composition of the people who live in that complex, on that street, in that subdivision. So as we move that polygon around to maybe drop a street and pick up a subdivision or pick up an apartment complex and drop 2 or 3 streets, as we navigate that, it gives us real-time information about how many students and what is the racial composition of those students, what grades they're in, and all the critical information that will help us as we're giving thought to and all due regard to those green factors that we just talked about. So we'll start to work with that in great measure as we're finishing up these meetings. As soon as we craft and develop and design, whatever that best word might be, we have principals who are providing us the names of 2 or 3 community school folks that they want to serve on a smaller group with me, maybe the PTO president, the teacher, or whatever they decide. I'm deferring to them. So we'll bring a smaller group of folks together and let them look at this plan with us. I'll sit down with the principals. They know some things I might not know, we may not see. They'll share with us. And we plan to bring this back out to you. We're going to bring it back out in 5 meetings. We're going to say, here's where we are. At that point, it's not etched in stone. We'll still be glad to hear your feedback. But I will just say this straight up. Not everybody's going to be happy at the end of the day. And we know that because we just don't like change. You know, I like it the way it is. I don't want to move. I grew up here. My family has been to this school. And let me say to you, I take no offense whatsoever to the passion you bring in conversation to this. I'm going to hope it's not personal. I don't think it is. And so I realize that, you know, short of talking about your religion and maybe your politics, how much more personal would we be getting with you than to be talking about your job and your home and your community? And so I know that there is a lot of concern and discontentment and fear. But one thing I really want to say about that is, you know, please don't get caught up in the frenzy. We don't have a plan yet. So rather than losing countless days, Facebooking back and forth, social media eating all over the place, I think I made up the word, you know, can we just hit pause, and there's not a plan. And we're hearing you, and we're going to bring it back to you, and we're going to still give you a voice when we bring it back to you. And I just hate to see people getting caught up in a feeding frenzy of this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and the other's going to happen, because you know what? You could be worried about things that aren't even going to happen. It may not even look that way. And if I could ask you to do one thing for you, for us as a community, take a deep breath, let's kind of hang on, let's crack this thing. You know, I'm not trying to shove this down your throat. I'm not trying to design a plan and act like I know more than you do. I've just arrived and I've got all the answers. I'm here because I need you to help me. I need you to help us. But please don't get caught up in feeding and fueling and speculating and guessing and conniving. I thought you were conniving. But I do get it. I got it. But please be careful, because it's not productive. It really is quite harmful at this point. So please give us a chance to hear you tonight. I may not be able to answer all your questions. I'll answer what I can, and I may have to say to you, let me get back with you on that. And we'll do just that. We'll get back with you. But please pause. Please hang on. Please don't panic. And give us a chance to build this thing, bring it back to you for your conversation and for your review. And even at that, I realize that, you know, the final plan's just not going to satisfy nor soothe everybody's concerns, but we are hearing you, and we're going to do the very best we can to support the common conversations that we're hearing. So I've talked way longer. I say every night I'm not going to do that, and I do it every night, don't I? When you come to the microphone, and I want you to do that, I want you to come and just tell us what your name is. I'm really, really proud of my kid, and I know you are, so if you want to come up and say, I have a 6th grader here and a 2nd grader there, we're happy to know that you're a parent and maybe where your children go to school if you want to share that with us. And then give us some ideas, give us some suggestions, pitch your best questions to us. If we can answer them, we will. If we can't, we'll research. This is evolving, and we will certainly answer those questions as we can craft and develop this. So, brave souls, come forward, share your name, share your concerns and your questions, and we're all ears. Kathy's taking great notes for me up here. Kathy Antes on our staff. Thank you, Kathy. Jason from Central Office, Media, Public Relations is with us. I may have some other folks, but thank you for these who are supporting our work tonight. Okay? Yeah, there are a couple resource pages while you all are making your way up here. If you'd like to give us feedback, we have the rezoning at hoover.k12.al.us. If you want to go to our website, you can go to the website, go to rezoning. When that pulls up, go to the left side of your page. There's a drop down that talks about rezoning and documents. We do have some documents and resources. We've added to the documents and resources as of today. We've added some information for you if you want to do some reading about unitary status. What does that mean? There's a timeline of how all of the desegregation court order timeline of events that's brought us to this point. So several new documents have been dropped out there even as of today. So feel free to go look at those resources. Feel free to offer us any feedback through our website, through our email system. Okay? Yes, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. My name is Larry Olmston. I live in the Shades Mountain community, and I have 2 children at Shades Mountain Elementary and a 7th grader at Berry Middle School. Last go-round of rezoning, Shades Mountain was affected. We were put down to Berry. You know, I didn't have a kid in the system at the time, so they didn't bother me. Now that my child is at Berry, we don't want to be, because we're the smallest school, to be the most affected because we are the easiest to put somewhere else. So that's a concern that I have. Let's see. You know, many people have spoken about the distance from the Shades Mountain area to Berry to Spain Park. It's only a mile difference, less than a mile difference from Berry to Bumpus and Hoover. So that's not an issue. Actually, you spend 3 more miles on the interstate going to Hoover than you do to Berry. So that's a big concern. The other question or concern that I've got is that my 7th grader, he is Jag art invested. He is in the band. He is in academic clubs with the robotics team. And many of my friends have children who will be going into 8th grade as well next year, who will be trying out for the freshman JV teams. How will this affect them if for some reason our small community school of the Shades Mountain area gets shifted just to fill up another campus?
Okay. So, I say this with all due respect. I hadn't been here long, but I've got this. When you drink Buck Kool-Aid, you drink Buck Kool-Aid, right? And if you drink Jag Kool-Aid, you drink Jag Kool-Aid. And I've had people who've said to me through this whole process, you know, these kids start wearing either black and orange yay-high or blue and orange yay-high, and that's tough. Excuse me, blue and black, and did I say orange or blue? Was that a dead giveaway or what?
Children do not look good at orange, so
what about grandfathering? You know, will we grandfather some of our children? And I said this to both of our high schools on yesterday, and that is, you know, those students, and I'll come to the elementary, I know you didn't ask high school, but, you know, it's really difficult to look at kids who are junior in high school and go, I'm going to need to move you. You know, I realize you just have 2 years. So I really think we've got to have a good conversation about, once those children are at that high school, do you start picking up juniors, sophomores, or seniors, of all things, and start moving those students around? And there's not a single thing about that feels right to me. Okay, so then that begs the question to step down. So how do you deal with that child who's an 8th grader getting ready to go there? Would those be students who have prepared all this time playing on middle school teams to get there? Would those 8th graders have some opportunity to be grandfathered? And that would be a conversation. I've even had the elementary parents say to me, but that would be my child's last year at that elementary school, and you're going to pick them up for just 1 year and go put them at a different elementary school before they get back into the feeder program. And I hear that, and that is a great question, and I promise you we're exceptionally sensitive to how might we grandfather children to the best of our ability to support that concern.
Well, even if it wasn't grandfather, if we didn't have a choice, we would have to change schools. For our band, our first, second chair percussionist, when they go to Simmons, you know, they may not have that same opportunity. You know, it will be difficult to integrate into the different clubs, athletics, academics. I still got a question. Unitary status.
Yes.
I understand completely why we want it.
Yes.
But with the possibility, with the growth, projected growth we've seen tonight, it looks, and as you said, it's possible in 2 to 3 years we could be going through rezoning again. Is it possible to delay this a year to come up with a better plan that is going to accept all the projected growth, and for us to know what we're going to do? Either we're going to build another school, or we're going to make on the 6th, 7th, 8th, you know, trace crossings K through 5. I mean, there are a lot of different options we can do, but on this side with Berry and Spain Park, there's, unless we add another school somewhere or add on to what we have, there's not very much that we're going to be able to do, and it's going to be impossible to continue to add with Kirkman Preserve, whatever else apartments or homes that are going to be built. So, you know, I don't want to rush to get unitary status at the expense of moving my child again and again and again.
And the only way that we could really ensure stability would this year, next year, whatever year, would almost be if there was a moratorium on construction. You know, stop, then we get it right, and we stay there. And obviously, and that's I'd have to ask over my head. And you know, that's not, I mean, there is no moratorium. And so there are those who look forward anxiously to Hoover continuing to grow, and there are those who are thinking, we're big enough, stop, hang on, stop. You know, I hear your concern, and I will say this to you. I would much rather absolutely get this right if it took us an additional year. But I will say this to you. There has at least been some contingency of our community that has said to me, you know, we were going to rezone, we weren't, we were going to move, our community was, then we weren't. It's been a bit sort of hanging out there and looming. Is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And I say that not as any measure of disrespect to Andy Craig, who preceded me. Great guy. That's not a negative to him. But it was going to happen, and then it wasn't, and then there, you know, some school communities were going to be impacted, and then they weren't. And so from that end, one of the things that I've heard is a little bit opposite of what you just said, though I respect what you just said, and that is let's tweak it as we need to, but we need to get this done because it's gonna happen, it's not, when's it gonna happen? Because communities and people want to make some decisions perhaps about themselves. But I defer absolutely to you that it is much more important to get this right, even if it takes us an additional year. But I don't think waiting an additional year is necessarily going to be it gives us more time. But there still is nothing beyond continuing to project that would help us any more as we study those numbers. It's still a projection out. We've just waited a year and added one more year of projection.
Well, my last statement is more of a statement than a question. So we all know that funding has been cut to $2 million a year. We have a Parks and Recreation Board that gets $9.85 million a year. We have a library that gets $6.5 million a year, which is great. We love that. That's part of what makes our city amazing. But we as the communities of Hoover, all the communities, have to get together, talk with the city council, email them, show up at the meetings to let them know that it is unacceptable to continue not funding our schools properly. If the rezoning was put off in a year's time, that would be enough time for us to find out from this city council, are you going to help us? Are you going to help us build another school to take care of all this growth that you obviously are not going to stop? And, I understand, zoning permits and things were approved many years ago. I understand that. But I also understand about the 97 homes that were just approved last week for the Greystone buried in Spain Park district, which, it doesn't seem like a big deal until I'm 11 miles away from the school, and when they have to cut somebody out of Barry or cut somebody out of Spain Park, the easiest person to cut is the people that's furthest away, which is exactly what happened 10 or so years ago. We were the smallest area. Hoover was big. Barry and Spain Park were wide open. So, Hoover. It was, I remember my neighbor, and actually another neighbor who actually is raising a family now, who graduated. One of them had a brother going to Hoover. She started Barry, because that's just the way it was. And, now we love it. We're Jags, go Jags. But those are the concerns, some of the concerns, may not even be all of them, but those are, we don't want to be the community that, because we're only sending 50 kids a year into the next school system or the next school, to say, well, there are only 50 kids, we can incorporate them in. It's a big deal. And, that's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yes. Hi, Mrs. Bowden. I was in second grade at Project Creation. I'm sure there's still new schools being built. What's the possibility of that? Is that being considered factoring in? What is the route if that were to be an issue?
Great question. So, I and central office and community people sharing ideas, there's just been all kinds of conversations going on out there. And so as it would relate to building a new school, a new high school, is that something that we're going to need to give thought to soon? I believe, as we saw on that slide, back us up to the optimal at our two schools. I believe it's 97 and 88, but let's see if my memory serves me correctly. So when you look at Hoover High School, Hoover's at 97.6 optimal capacity. Spain Park is at 88. So when you look at that optimal capacity pushing 88 and 97, is this the time to at least engage that conversation for a third high school? One of the things that I do know is that, wow, what two great high schools we have, Hoover High School and Spain Park. And I've heard people have shared these ideas with me. Well, why don't you all go over to Oberry and just renovate that building and make it a third high school? I'm sorry, I'm just not of the opinion after you look at Hoover High School and Spain Park that renovating an old building is going to be acceptable to most of our parents whose children would go there. So I've had those who've said to me, well, just take it down, except for the mural building. Just take it down and build your third high school at that location. And then others have said, that's not the right spot, it's not the wrong location. And so, you know, there are conversations, we're looking, we're thinking, we're processing. You know, is it time to have that conversation based on what we're seeing with these percentages? And if so, where and when? And so there are a lot of unanswered pieces there, Larry, too. I'm sorry to my other lady. Thank you for that question. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so she asked about elementary schools. Again, I'm thinking when we look at, I'm thinking purely from economics. So I said that. I realize that, you know, we're thinking babies too. I got that. But when you really think economically and when you really think about being savvy with the taxpayers' money, the first question would be, are we optimally utilizing what we already have before we start to build? And whether we say yes or no to that, at least that's got to be a conversation when you look at, for example, Trace Crossings being used to 60% capacity. Then I think our taxpayers could reasonably say, hang on a minute, we're building a new elementary school, but we have one that's only being used to 60% capacity. Is that best and wisest use of taxpayer money? And then we'd have to have that conversation. But great question. Maybe the grade configuration would help support in some sort of way. So, new school concepts, what, how, when, where? Do we reconfigure grades to fix, absorb, help? Those are all conversations. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm Nikki Mayhew, and this is my daughter, Sophie. She's a current 8th grader at Berry Middle School. I also have a 5th grader at Shades Mountain Elementary. I've lived here all my life. I went through Shades Mountain myself, Simmons, Old Berry, graduated there. I graduated in 90. I was in the middle of all, changed into Hoover. I've been through all. I've been here. I got married. We had a child, and we moved back to the Shades Mountain community because I loved it so much. I'm blessed enough that I'm able to be in both schools that my children are in at least one day a week. A full day at Shades Mountain on Wednesdays, generally at Berry, a full day on Tuesdays. This week I've been there 2 days. Myself, I'm very invested in these schools for my children. My daughter, she is very academically inclined. She's already got her 5, 10, 15-year program. You know, she's got that road ready for herself. You know, I'm lucky that she's got that mindset. She wanted to come to 9 because she was very concerned. You know, she will be moving from 8 to 9. That's a concern for her. You know, we've already made a connection. She's already wanting engineering programs. She's a member of several things. She's teams, the acronym has won state last year. These are things, math team, best robotics. These are things that are very concerning to her. Math team being, yes, some of these programs are, which we don't know if she's going to be moved to a different high school, but that is something that she's concerned about because Shanesville High School. But to let you know how concerned, Ms. here, but her as a child, that she's already got this mapped out. And for me, the reason why I do go to the schools every week, because I want to know, these people, I know Dr. Owens, I feel like I know him personally. Because I want to know what type of people my children are with, not to discredit the other schools. But I'm invested in it. I know that when Brayden moves up, I'm putting my child in his hands, and I know in my heart, not just my head, my heart, that he's going to take care of my baby like it's his. And that, you know, you're saying about passion, that's what it is. It's passion, because I want to do everything I can to make my children and my friends, the whole population, I want to do what I can to make their day easier so they're able to teach my children to the best ability that they can. That's my statement. My question is, okay, you were speaking about the unitary. How does that benefit our school system? That wasn't addressed. It's just kind of, I understand that you want unitary across the board, but how, other than everything being the same, how does that help the school system having that? No.
Well, that's a federal court order, and so there is an expectation of compliance to the federal court order. And so just as a simple example of how that process can stymie our process, as we thought about the use of the Old Berry School, we had no rights to really proceed in any particular direction until we could clearly articulate with the Department of Justice how we would accommodate those students in that school. Now, even if we had a great plan and we were ready to roll with it, we were put on complete hold because we are under the desegregation court order. We do not have unitary status, and until we acquire that, then the Department of Justice has much more control, say-so.
Is that expecting, right around here, we've got Vestavia, we've got Mount Brook, we've got Homewood. Is that affecting why is it affecting us? Is it affecting us?
Because we were a pull-out of the Jefferson County School District, and Jefferson County was under the desegregation court order, and because we pulled out from them, we remained under the desegregation court order.
Okay. Something, that you keep talking about is the minority, and specifically speaking to the African American community. Shays Mountain is a very diverse community. It's one of the things that I love about it. When we have Multicultural Day, I don't even know, we've got such a large number of different ethnicities, and you're addressing the financial status, like the African American community is always, a lower, the way I was understanding, like a lower income. We are a very blue-collar community. We do have a lot of families that are, their parents, lawyers, engineers, but we've got a lot of families that are very low income that are not African American. They're white, they're Indian, they're African, which we've got very different community, but they're not being addressed. We've got white children that are on reduced feeding meals or things of that nature. Yes. I don't hear that part of the community is being addressed.
We address all of our students. The only reason for the conversation about African American children in particular is specific to the Department of Justice and the unitary status. We are focused on all children, free reduced lunch, children who pay full price, children who are black, white. We're concerned about all of our children. The only reason the conversation of African American is because the Department of Justice role is to ensure that there is no disproportionate, unfair treatment of those students based on those grade factors.
Also, at Berry, there is a group that, and I could be not had the full understanding of this group possibly. But Alpha, that is a group it's a minority group that is, from my understanding, is focused on African American children. Where you're saying you don't have groups that are only this group, all white, all this, all that. But there is one that I may not be completely right on that, but I was understanding that is focused primarily on African American boys. So that there is a group that is where you're saying that there's none that are supposed to be for one group, but they are. It's my understanding, but I think we not have the full. Okay, I think that's everything, but I just, we are passionate, we are absolutely.
I think we give this young lady a hand. She obviously's got a plan, and I'm proud of her.
I'm concerned, but she's so concerned because she's got her route. She's already talked with the engineering.
I know,
person. It's one of those things that she's worried because she's spoken with that person and she knows she's already got a plan.
Thank you. I'm proud of you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Crystal Wilkerson. My son is at River Chase Elementary, and I just have three relatively quick points. First point is, under the prior plan, I know you haven't looked at that, but I just want to raise that under the prior plan, several portions of the current River Chase zone were being shifted to Greystone. My particular neighborhood, which is on the Valleydale corridor, I guess, was not being moved at the time. But I have heard in some of the prior meetings that you've had that the least, or the most vulnerable to rezoning are the ones on the perimeter, perhaps, of the school zone. And being a parent that lives on the perimeter, I just wanted to note that should my neighborhood on the perimeter be shifted to Greystone, traveling from the River Chase area, I would have to drive by 6 other schools, which are a combination of Shelby County schools and private schools, which will also include Oak Mountain Elementary, which has horrendous carpool that goes out onto Highway 119, as well as Briarwood High School, Westminster School, Inverness Elementary, Oak Mountain High School, and Oak Mountain Middle School. So attempting to get from my home to Greystone during peak carpool times would be a nightmare. And I'm a stay-at-home mom so that I can take my kids to and from school and volunteer at schools. And so it would be an undue burden on me and other parents that live in the River Chase area generally, whether we're on the perimeter or not, to travel that distance with the traffic, which does include Highway 280. Second point is that I just want you to be aware that the River Chase neighborhood community extends beyond River Chase. We have Arbor Hill, we have various apartment complexes, and we have other subdivisions that don't have River Chase in their name, but we are all equally invested in the River Chase community as a whole. I think we have one of the most diverse communities and friendly and accepting communities in the system. Our demographics are in full alignment with the city of Hoover as a whole when it comes to race and economics of the student population. So other than pure size concerns with River Chase growing, I don't see there being any reason within the green factors for any River Chase student to be unnecessarily messed with in this process in order to equalize other schools. Let's see what else. River Chase is a large property, so there's room on River Chase's campus for classroom expansion. In my humble view, I'm not an expert. Last thing is you mentioned grandfathering. I have a second grader right now. I also have a preschooler. And so I'm not really that invested in grandfathering, except that I can recall as a Hoover High School student back in the 90s when Trace Crossings was the elementary school and River Chase students went to Trace Crossings and River Chase students went to Hoover High School. When Spain Park was built, if I recall correctly, students were given a choice the first couple of years to remain at Hoover or to choose to go to Spain Park. And I think that was a good way to handle it, and several students and families did choose to go to the new school, and others chose to remain because of siblings or whatever. But giving students a choice and parents a choice, I think, is important.
questions. One is regarding the optimal capacity. I'm wondering if, several of these are in the 90s, that they're at 90-something% of their optimal capacity, and then some of the others are in the 70s or the 108s or, the 60s. So I was wondering if you anticipate that the changes will affect across the board, or typically those that are too high or too low, more so. I mean, obviously, but do you anticipate that the ones that are already at a pretty good optimal number will stay relatively the same, or?
Obviously, the concern for that mathematically would be if those weren't impacted, you couldn't fix those that were not at those appropriate capacities. So I think the best I could say to that is anticipate that there will be an impact of some measure for all of our schools, because it's as I've said in every meeting, a bit of the domino. You touch one, it taps the next, and it taps the next. So I think the fairest thing I could say at this point, minus the plan in front of us, would be there would be some impact to be anticipated for all of our schools.
Another question regarding, do you anticipate that both single-family dwellings and multi-family dwellings will be affected, or do you anticipate that one will be more affected than the other?
I don't anticipate that one would be more or less. I think there's the same opportunity for us as we enlarge, decrease, and move that polygon around to find the best way to get this to work. So I certainly couldn't say that one or the other would be most impacted at this point.
One of the slides that you showed, because we're part of the Rocky Ridge crowd, showed a projection in 2019 of an additional 240 potential students or houses, or it's like an apartment going up, I guess. That's scary. That was the biggest number on that slide. Can you please?
Yeah. Do you want to back that up and let's see if we can find where she's talking about? Go to the one that has the map. We're thinking it's that triangular piece that's going to see the little triangular, the smaller piece. That is an apartment complex. It's actually been obviously undeveloped at this point, but that is zoned for apartments. And so it's been zoned for apartments with an expected date of perhaps the development being that year that you saw that large number.
And my question is, how do you anticipate handling that in this area? Because what if that's in the Rocky Ridge area now? Rocky Ridge is packed, and it doesn't have a lot of properties in Mason River Chase does. I mean, we could build something there, but I don't see how we can take on 243 more.
Yeah, and so take that's. Yeah, that was not students, that was dwellings. So take us out to the slide that shows us that number of dwellings. So the trace crossings in 2019, the anticipated is the 278. That's the actual number of dwellings. Does this tell me, based on the dwellings, what to expect student-wise? And so the about 2.6 students dwellings for every student.
So, 75, 80,
Yes. 75 or so students would come out of something about that size. And there's an interesting calculation process. The higher the price, the home, generally that's not your younger families with school-age children. And so we're looking at all the, if it's a $500,000 home per door front, about how many children come out of that. And multifamily dwellings, about how many children from those units. So we're studying those, shared with us calculations as to how we might determine the number of students coming out of those dwellings.
Two more questions. One is, I was at the meeting on Tuesday, and one of the points that you made was either I can't remember exactly what you said, but you talked about needing more funding, more revenue streams. And so there's the whole idea of raising taxes, and that's one way of it. But I just wondered, did you have any ideas? Because I know Tuesday was a pretty heated meeting, and people talked about, well, can the developers contribute, at least to help pay for the schools that they're impacting by building all this new development. And dovetailing with that, will the redistribution of students also affect the redistribution of already tight budgets for our schools?
Impact our budgets?
Yeah, like our school budget has been slashed over and over again, and I'm wondering if with the redistribution of students, will that affect the redistribution of budgets, or will it just continue to be cut?
Yeah, so, just the fundamental conversation about funding is, as I shared at the other meeting, if you don't mind, for those who weren't there, the source of funds for our school district are federal funds, state funds, and local funds, pretty simply put. We do not get much in the area of federal funds because very oftentimes Title I, Title II, your federal funds are more designed for children in higher poverty communities than ours being a bit more affluent. Some of our schools are title schools, though, based on the number of those children who come from families who are economically struggling. So we get some federal monies, but not a significant amount. State funding. So just a quick example of how state funding impacts us is that we get about 75 cents for every dollar we spend in transportation. It was one of the reasons why Andy Gregg had proposed, hey, this is costing us $2.5 million every year to run our buses. This is a way we can save money. So it's certainly one of the reasons that I'm sure he took a look at transportation. So when the state has expectations, and I'm not so much talking State Department of Education as I'm thinking legislatively, when legislation is passed that impacts us financially, but it doesn't come with the necessary support, then we're left to try to take care of that, and the only way you can do that is from local money. So, as you know, our most recent history during the legislative session, there was continued conversations about the Education Trust Fund and, the fact that the general funds and Education Trust Fund might combine and how we're going to do all that. We went to a first special called legislative session, special session, and spent about $500,000 of taxpayer money to see if we could have some more conversations about budgets and how we might get to the Education Trust Fund monies. And after that $500,000 was spent legislatively, we called a second legislative session and spent about another $500,000 trying to talk about Education Trust Fund budgets and other things. So we spent about $1 million trying to have conversations about budgets, legislatively calling 2 special sessions. And at the end of the day, what happened is that the legislators took $80 million out of the Education Trust Fund, funds that support the school district, because they believed that was a surplus. And if that's a surplus, I sure wish they would have sent it to Hoover. I'd like my part of that surplus. But the legislators then chose to what they call backfill that $80 million. And of course, my simple mind was this: if you've got a way to backfill $80 million, use your backfill money and do what you want. Quit taking it away from children out of the Education Trust Fund. You have that whole dynamic of state funding and what that looks like, and I'm sorry, I'm just absolutely of the opinion for some reason we have this huge bullseye on our back as public education, and we just keep seeming to get our money siphoned off of us and away from us. And then the other sources of fund for us are local funding. We received $2 million from the city of Hoover. The basic support there would be ad valorem taxes support public schools, sales taxes support public schools, and then again, jumping back to the state for just a minute, your local state income tax. So, you know, we either have to sell a whole lot of donuts as a fundraiser, or very honestly, it's pretty simple math, and I gave this example, I think, the other night, and that is when I look at my personal checkbook, and I'm spending it for productive things, but I'm spending more than I'm adding. There comes that day where I have to really say to myself, can I continue to sustain those things that I have been doing that I believed were worthy and worthwhile, but my budget is now no longer allowing me to do that. Then I have two options, simple math. I either have to cut significantly, and I use this example, I think, Larry, at your school, I want to go to Europe twice this summer. Guess what? I'm not going once this summer. Have a kid in graduate school, I'm still paying for a house, you know, I'm like you guys, I have commitments and things that I have to do. So there may be a lot of things that we want to do, and there are a lot of things that we do that make us uniquely Hoover. That we have hung our hat on, and we've been so proud of. We have lower enrollments per teacher-student ratio than most of our schools in the surrounding area and in the state. We pay our teachers above the teacher minimum salary pay schedule. And yet what we do know is that we can't continue to sustain doing what we're doing that makes us uniquely Hoover, that allows your children to have foreign languages, arts, and all the extra opportunities that they have. We're either going to have to significantly back away from that, or we have to find another revenue stream. More support, more help, somehow, somewhere. I'm going to call President Obama tonight. we definitely have to have an additional stream.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, you on Tuesday spoke more about it, and I wonder if you can clarify, what is your timeline for this plan? You mentioned some meeting coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. So Judge Hackla is the judge that is working with Hoover City Schools related to the unitary status. And the next meeting with Judge Hackla is in December, and that is one of the reasons we've quickened our pace a little bit, because when we get to that December meeting with Judge Hackla, if there's some reason this gets slowed down, if you will, or the process doesn't keep its pace, I prefer it be because of that schedule, the court schedule, and their inability to help us make this happen versus I want to do everything I can do to make it happen, if at all possible and reasonable and prudently by school year 16-17. So that meeting in December with Judge Hackla, there's a follow-up meeting with Judge Hackla, I believe January, maybe early February. And so, again, we're going to be busy working, crafting, developing, getting back out to our community and sharing and showing with the obvious understanding that if it doesn't come together or the judge can't help meet that particular timeline that we thought we could meet, then we will very frankly be somewhat at the mercy of the court on that. I just want us to have done everything we could reasonably do, to have all of our homework done. I want to be able to stand in front of that judge and be able to say to them, we've engaged our community, we are engaged our teachers, we're listening, we've shared, here are the things they've told us, here's what we've developed, we're working, we're moving. And if that's just not good enough, I'm going to be able to still put my head on my pillow and know I did everything for the school district to get it to happen in a time frame that seemed reasonable. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I only have about 2 questions. My name is Kristen Landers. I have 2 boys at Shea Mountain Elementary. We love it here. It's a great school. Like most parents here, I'm passionate about my children's education and passionate about where they go to school. I'm passionate about Hoover for a lot of reasons. My parents moved to Hoover when I was 2. And I grew up on Starlight Drive, feeding the ducks down at the lake. My name is etched to the sidewalk. I vandalized it, sorry. City officials here.
We
question possibly, that I know that you probably talk to the mayor, talk to city council, different people. It bothers me that 23% of expenses are dedicated to highway and road repairs, and 1.61% is dedicated to education in our schools. And I think that Hoover City needs to have a little bit of a reality check on what it takes to run these fabulous schools in the city. And I don't know how to make that happen, but I think that maybe we as constituents can make it happen as the city council comes up for election, every other year or so, that we need to talk to them about maybe reallocating some of their money. Maybe it's not, well, obviously we have to do some rezoning, but maybe also it's reallocating some of the money that they take in from us, the taxpayers in the city, to give back to education. Does that make sense? Okay, and is that, should we start making appointments with the mayor? Should we start making appointments with the city council?
She's trying to get me home.
No, this is not about you, I promise. This was my inference as I read through this. I just thought it's such a poor distribution, in my opinion. And it irritates me after having graduated from Berry High School and loving this community so much that so little is spent on our children.
And let me just give you just a snippet, I think, of the history. And anyone who knows this better than I'll stand corrected and take no offense when you do it. I believe that it was about 2008 when we 2009, hey, here's the historian, help me. So in 2009, our school district from the Jefferson County 1% money received about $65 to $70 million. Am I close? Received about $65 million from that Jefferson County money in 2009. And if I have that history right, once we got that amount of money, the amount of money from the city decreased. And so we began to run our school district off of the revenue stream that came from that Jefferson County money. And we have sustained ourselves over these several years since 2009, really depending on that money, being good stewards of that money, but again, subtracting that money out as we have not mismanaged your money, but as we have offered all kinds of above and beyond experiences and opportunities for your children in smaller classrooms, and it costs money. It cost us $13 million a month to run our school district. And that is in great measure because we do so much more above and beyond to support our children. We invest more of our local money into our children than most other school districts in the state. We give them many more opportunities and experiences than so many other school districts in the state, and that costs money. So as we had that money, but over these many years have subtracted that money, I'm not suggesting to you we're going broke. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying it costs $13 million a month to operate our school district. The state expects us to maintain at least a 1 month's operating amount in our account, and we're well above that. 4 to 6 plus months, we're fine if we didn't get a dime from the state. However, you understand math. I just explained my personal checkbook. Minus in 2009, minus 2010, minus 2011, 12, 13, 14, we're at 15, and that has pulled that revenue stream down significantly. Did I answer your question, maybe?
I just think that if that revenue stream is literally, and if it's near its run course, I think the city's going to have to make some different choices. That's my opinion. And I think as citizens, we're going to have to encourage them to do that.
Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Aisha Crawford. I have a 7th grade, 12-year-old boy at Berry. We transferred from a Birmingham City School, John Herbert Phillips Academy in the 3rd grade, so he went from River Chase to Berry. He is pretty much a straight-A student, first chair in the trombone section of the band. He just made the basketball team, so we're really invested. I heard a lot of people talking about possibly grandfathering in high school students. Would that be possible for middle school students as well?
I'm not prepared to say absolutely no, but the problem is you can't grandfather everybody because then the whole process doesn't work. And so
We don't want it to work, we want it to
she's trying to drag the plan under. That's what you're trying to do. I get it. We were giving serious consideration at my level as I engaged staff and others in these conversations. We understand the value of grandfathering. To what extent that goes, how far down it goes, hang on. I really can't answer that, but I hear you. And I don't say that lightly. I do hear you. Kathy's taking notes. Your point has consistently been made in all of our community meetings.
Okay. I have one other concern. Right now I'm in a multi-dwelling unit. I know a lot of people in the Hoover City area don't really think fondly of people who live in apartments. A lot of us, though, actually pay a lot to live there. I think I get emotional because I'm in the process of purchasing a home, and I want to keep him where he is, but I'm not excited about getting into $250,000 worth of debt to get a home to live here permanently, and then he'd be transferred to another school. Greystone Legacy. I probably won't get there this year, but I am, I've got my pre-approval and I'm ready to move, but I'm just afraid to jump into something and then we get shifted, so.
And she's kind of making the point that we talked earlier about, it's just hanging out there. Now, later, this year, next year.
So if you can just tell me what street to move.
Thank you. That spoken from the heart. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
My name's Brandy Conley, and I'm a proud River Chase parent. I have a second grader there, and I'm also an apartment dweller. And I really don't have a question. It's more of an encouragement for you, and just a concern that in the last round, the apartment dwellers were vilified. We were lower than the homeowners. We were messing up the schools. We were not listened to. We were not invited to any meetings. There were private meetings going on with parents, and there were no apartment families invited to sit in on those. Like, we could not have a vote at the table. And in my case, my husband and I moved to Hoover very intentionally. We grew up in a small rural county. We wanted what Hoover offered. So I'm an executive at a nonprofit in town, and I moved to Hoover to get those experiences for my children. And I am investing a lot of money in rent, and it's actually more than what my mortgage payment was on my house in another town. So my encouragement would be to you just to maybe invite some of us to sit at that table. Because I've lived in the same apartment for 3 years. We moved to it in the summer before my daughter started kindergarten. We are involved in the school. We are invested in the community, and we just want to make sure that our voice is heard as well as all of the great homeowners in the city.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Scott Powell. I have a 5-year-old kindergartner at Rocky Ridge and 2 middle school girls at Marion Middle School. So, a long-time user of Hoover City Schools. A couple of quick questions. First one, of the 13,000 plus students that were there and the projected growth, whatever that would be, can you say what % of those are students who actually live outside of the city of Hoover?
I cannot tell you that. I can tell you 2 things, though, about that. I can tell you, one, that we have student services who on a daily, ongoing basis go out to check residencies, to include late at night, to make sure folks who claim to live there in that apartment or that house actually are there. I think it's kind of I get the concern, but isn't it really nice that people want to come and live in Hoover? I think that's a compliment to the community, but we're very careful to go and check residency. So I can tell you this, if we know they're out of district, we're addressing them, with the only exception that we allow our teachers to bring their children with us, because otherwise, as soon as the bell rings, they're running out the door to the next county to go grab their children. So we think they're more engaged with us, and no need running out the door at 2:45 to go pick their children up, and we can help them keep their children close to us. But we absolutely check residency. But I can't tell you that there aren't people who sneak by us and figure out a way to do it.
Well, and I will tell you, and this may not make me the most popular person in the room, but I've never really cared about that. So, but in that respect, I do understand that. But at the same time, my wife and I, we both have full-time jobs, and one of us has to leave our work to go pick up our kids and do something with them, and still stay till 5 o'clock and make that work. And you did say earlier, that our teachers are well paid in comparison to.
I actually said they were paid above the minimum salary scale.
Fair. That is fair.
I don't think I said they were well paid.
I will not put words into your mouth. So just wondering if that was a consideration and what percent of the total student population that might actually be in terms of that.
Yeah, and we'll get that for you, and we have considered that absolutely something that we do, A, for those teachers, but B, we think it makes them better teachers for us if they can be there for after school and get there in the mornings and they're not running, some distance away. But I hear your concern. Everybody else has to do it, but I don't anticipate that changing. It certainly would not be my recommendation for that to change. That's one of those things we do for our teachers. But Kathy,
It's about 260 students approximately. It doesn't vary a lot every year, so it's 1.5% of the total population.
Okay, thank you. The second question, and obviously, we have a caboose with 2 middle schoolers and a kindergartner, and so one of our concerns would be if something was to change about actually, looking at moving across, lines. I guess we can kind of all understand, small changes, and you're talking about a street here and a street there and everything else, and so I can understand when you're looking at, maybe our kindergartner being at a different elementary school before he moves on. The larger consideration probably is the stream and the flow, and I know I'm probably oversimplifying things, but when you look at the percentages, you look at the standard deviation of the percent of capacity for all the ones feeding into Spain Park, there's not a huge deviation between any one of them in terms of approximation of capacity. Berry Middle School being almost full, it's really hard to conceive how you could take elementary school kids from one place and move them over and not even create a problem at the end for Hoover High School, which is closer to capacity than Spain Park, or for Berry, which is already at capacity. So can you comment to the likelihood of switching within elementary schools, but the fact that with Berry having a lot of spare capacity, it seems very unlikely that you can bring elementary school kids from Hoover into this system without overfilling and making Berry a logjam in the process?
well, those lies much of the problem. These are some of the conversations, again, that we're having. I understand that we don't want to have, some of our children in that feeder zone running wherever that is, while I have other children in this feeder zone, and we split our families and parents out all directions. And so, again, great thought and consideration, but I really, beyond that, to be able to say to you much more is that obviously is a concern that not just you, but others have said, please don't have many people running to this feeder zone, back to that feeder zone. I have 3 or 4 children, and I don't need to be doing this all day in the mornings and in the evenings.
Final question, which I think is related to that one. Within that same vein, if we're having a conversation with people here to find out what's happening in the Spain Park kind of feeder zone, would you say that the reason that we're looking at this has more to do with the green and the student designation in terms of where it is? Because it seems like if you have greater variations within the Hoover elementary schools, that if it were just a matter of redistricting, that you could fix the overpopulated and underpopulated within that side and fix the flow pattern. But how much of the necessity of potentially moving students around has to do with the fact that, because the one thing we didn't see up there was what the the racial makeup of the schools within different Spain Park feeder schools would be, where you're actually having to correct for that purposes. And can you kind of, not specific percentages, but is that more of the consideration for why there may need to be additional changes versus being able to fix it internally within the Hoover side?
Yeah, so good question, and I have no problems with us sharing those ratios, and I'll be glad for us to do that. But again, as it relates to what is the primary reason for this decision, it is much, much, much less about the Department of Justice and us making sure that we have fairly distributed our students in utilization of facilities. But certainly would say to you, yes, Department of Justice is a player in this. We had this conversation with some of our folks before we left the office. If you were just addressing our side of it, that's one conversation. But when you're addressing our side of it, but you have to give sensitivity and consideration to the other green factors, of course it impacts that process. But again, primarily us and our need to distribute students, utilize facilities, but obviously the Department of Justice and those green factors affect us too. If we were just trying to do one or the other, it might be easier, but we're trying to meet our needs at the same time balancing the concerns of the 6 grade factors. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Adriana Walker. I actually teach at Shady Mountain Elementary, and I'm a parent of a student who attends Hoover City School. My question is basically, with the rezoning thought process, can you reassure us as parents and as educators that the first thing that will change about us will not be one of the things that made us uniquely Hoover: class sizes? I love having small classrooms because I can touch all of my children, and I love the fact that my child is in a class that is smaller because he learns more effectively there.
It's my understanding when Hoover City Schools was created that one of those things that was particularly important to our community was that we respect the size of that classroom, that we have smaller classroom sizes. The state tells us, based on the age of the children, how many children maximum you can have in an elementary class, middle school, secondary class, and we have stayed significantly below that. And it's my great desire that we continue to do that. And so, can I give you a 100% guarantee that class size won't go up 2 or 3 kids next year? Again, we're going to come back to the conversation of budget and the fact that we need support and/or there has to be cuts. So those are the only 2 things that can happen. And we will do everything we can to give thought to any cuts that we could make that will minimally to no impact or significant impacts on our children. So the answer is we'll do the best we can. I'm certainly not going to promise you anything because next year maybe you do have 2 more kids. I don't know. Absolutely. I have been in school districts. I've been in education for 31 years. I have been at a high school where we had 35 children in a class teaching math. So I say this with all due respect. You have your kids in Hoover tonight as you're saying your good night prayers. You ought to thank God for Hoover City Schools and for where your children are. I have seen very, very different school districts than this one, and we're awfully blessed in Hoover, and I am just so regretful that a little girl named Connor Murphy White did not have the privilege to be in this school district, my baby girl, and I mean that. Yes, sir.
Hey, Mike Foreman. I got a kindergartner at River Chase. Actually, it was a follow-up to one of Scott's questions. From what I understand, there was a plan last year which did reorganize the Hoover side. Can you go over the details of that plan and then why it was never followed through with?
Yes. I don't know that plan. I've not seen that plan, and some people...
For the 2015-2016 school year?
I've not seen it.
Okay.
So that was a plan that was crafted and developed by Mr. Craig, who preceded me. And with all due respect to his plan, I've chosen intentionally not to take that plan as my plan. I hadn't even looked at that plan. Now, you may think that's a shame because a lot of work went into that. Why haven't you pulled that plan, studied it, and looked at it? But I really wanted to come out to the community with no particular mindset, a very clean, now don't misunderstand, which I think I did the other night. Don't misunderstand, we've got a clean slate to work from to me, and I'm not giving any thought to this, and I don't have a clue what the developments are that are about to happen to us. I don't mean clean as in there's nothing going on processing-wise, but I've not seen that plan. I've intentionally not seen that plan, and I can't really speak to all the reasons that plan didn't come to fruition. I'm not particularly sure.
Part of it had the issue of unitary status came up after the initial
Okay,
plan was
so
developed.
Kathy
And so
has a
that-
piece of history on that, that after that plan was developed, that's when some of the
Yeah.
unitary Department of
That's
Justice.
when the Department of Justice came to us and said, we need to get, after that plan was initially developed, the Department of Justice really came to Jefferson County and us as a former portion of Jefferson County, saying that it was, the Department of Justice had a goal to get the districts that were still under a desegregation order out of the desegregation order, and so they were anxious to get us to be granted unitary status. And that would have started the plan all over again. Mr. Craig had already extended a position as Deputy Superintendent for the state, and it would not have been really appropriate, I think that's a good word, for him to start something that he could not complete. So that was really what brought the end, why that became rather dormant as we were waiting for our new superintendent to come and start to address these issues.
So that plan didn't meet those requirements?
They were never evaluated under the unitary status evaluation factor, because once a year had passed by the time Dr. Murphy came to us, so she wanted to take this approach, which is a reasonable and well-intended approach, and it may wind up we come up with a plan that's exactly like that plan was. We just don't know.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm Michael Klein. I have a first grader at River Chase. I'm going to have two more coming through the system. I want to encourage and reiterate something else somebody else has said. I promised my wife and daughter that I would say something for them tonight. And it's on the outskirts of River Chase. We just moved about a year ago, and we wanted, we specifically wanted this spot, and we're encouraged by, wanting to be a River Chase, and just really the question, or encourage of taking into account the commute of, we actually live to Quail Run, Valley Station area, and that my daughter rides the bus, and we wish we could figure out something else, but it is nerve-wracking having your daughter ride the bus, and for that commute to be that much longer, I really want you to take into account that commute to, if it lives to Greystone or whatever. I don't have anything against Greystone School or nothing like that. Let's take into account the logistics of some of this is the biggest concern. And where is there a commute time that would be too long? I mean, do you run numbers on that, or like what?
Once we look at this plan and look at what those routes would look like, we're going to run them. We're going to run them with buses. We're going to time them. We're going to give thought to that morning traffic, that afternoon traffic, so that we have a reasonable thought about in high traffic, what is this going to look like? So that has been a pretty consistent concern. Please give thought to the distance, and the traffic, and 280 and 459, and all those pieces that impact all of us as we're commuting, particularly our little ones on buses. So you go home and tell me you did it.
I'm thinking about mine.
Okay, if you have a question, we're about 8:37, so if you'll come to the mic, and we don't want to leave any questions or comments unheard, and we'll start to wrap up. Yes, sir.
My name is David Pettit, and I live here in the Rocky Ridge zone. As a matter of fact, my house is right back behind there. I wish my wife's grandfather had sold this property 100 years ago, and at today's prices, I could take care of the problem. Rocky Ridge School is built on property that belonged to my wife's family. As a matter of fact, my daughters are third-generation Rocky Ridge students. My wife's mother taught at Rocky Ridge, I would say 100 years ago, but she'd kill me. have you given consideration to some of these schools that are adjacent school districts for elementary that are overcrowded, offering neighborhoods that are in the border areas the choice, voluntary rezoning? It might solve some problems. Some of the parents may agree if all of our street moved over to this district, they may be happy to do so, especially if they have a lot of young children. The older children, the longer they go, the more invested they get. That's question number one. Question number two, are these green requirements always going to be in place for Hoover schools, or is it something that at some point in time we can separate ourselves from having formerly been Jefferson County and say we no longer have that mandate on us because Hoover's proven that that's not an issue for them that Jefferson County may have had an issue with in the past. And then lastly, a comment, I don't want this to be vilifying homeowners versus apartment owners. However, homeowners do pay a large amount of tax. We voted that on ourselves. And as a homeowner, you're more invested financially overall than an apartment dweller. If an apartment dweller wants to show, if that's where they need to be, maybe agree to sign extended leases to show that they're invested in that school district as opposed to the turnover that does occur in apartments, and that creates a problem. Hoover maybe setting a date, say, in this school year, anyone else who moves into the apartment complex, whatever, that will automatically mean they're in a new zone. If you live there and you stay there, because, a lot of people like apartment living, that they can extend their lease and stay invested in grandfather in that way. And especially appreciate the homeowner, the apartment owner who's looking to be a homeowner, because that's what we get as well as our family. And so just some thoughts to look at, maybe to solve this problem in itself.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to answer those?
Are we always going to have the green?
You will not always have the green factors. As soon as we acquire unitary status, that acquisition is in place. That does not mean there would not be those occasions when the federal government would come back and just spot check, make sure that we had not run them up. But once we've cleared those green factors, we acquire unitary status.
Okay, so that's a status gets out.
Yes.
Okay, and the other thing about voluntary rezoning of people in neighborhoods that they may choose to.
You're talking about in Hoover. You're not talking about outside of our school district.
Within the district, you've got, say, one school that was over 100%. The district next door in Hoover is at 60%.
Offering some option for them to choose if they wanted to take the transfer.
May solve itself to some degree.
Yeah. I actually posed that question, and I was talking about high schools with some of our staff and said if we were to say students at Hoover High School, if they had the option, could we pull some of that burden from Hoover High School? And so we've tossed some of that around. So,
particularly the elementaries are overloaded.
okay.
Those two.
Yeah.
I mean, they are within, I would say, 2 miles at distance. When you say, there might be, because I know that Park is very passionate, like we're very passionate in Chase Mountain. That might.
It might appeal if they could go as a neighborhood, several streets.
The distance for a lot of those families would not be significant.
Particularly while they're younger, 2 or 3 streets may choose to jump from one school to the other because then their neighbors' kids are going to school together. And that's the big thing is, your neighbor 3 doors down is now in one district of Hoover and the other is in another, and they grew up together and they get pulled apart. And that's kind of what Hoover was for in the first place, was that it was our neighborhood schools.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul.
Hey, my name is Paige Hoover, and I have 2 children that attend Chase Mountain Elementary School, first grade and second grade. And I just had to make a statement regarding the possibility of us being rezoned every 3 to 5 years. I mean, or you made a comment, you can't promise that we won't be doing this in the next few years, but I would highly encourage you to do whatever you can to build a long-term plan for rezoning. And I understand with building and the city growing that you can't always make that promise, but the children really deserve some stability. It would be extremely unfair to tell an elementary school child that, hey, you're going to go to this middle school, and then if he's into this high school, and then 3 years later, we're going to pull you out and we're going to move you over to this one, and now you'll be going to this high school. I just really feel strongly that these children deserve that stability. And so whatever you can do to help build a long-range plan to prevent this from happening frequently, that's what we need to do. Now, my questions kind of go back to some of the previous questions that were asked before. And I think mainly that's just because I need some clarification. Is there any discussion, since we've talked about how disproportionate some of the elementary schools are so heavily weighted, and then you look at the middle schools that they're feeding into, they seem to be underweighted, and then the high schools that those middle schools go into are overweighted. Is there any discussion where we're going to shift some of those middle schools to different high schools? You know, for example, would Simmons be going to Spain Park to kind of even that out? Is that something that y'all are talking about?
The question is, could those students end up changing feeder patterns?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is that's possible.
Okay. And then I guess my second question is, I was under the impression that none of our schools allow children or parents to pay out of district fees so they can attend the school. Is that correct?
I will not say that there are no, the question was, do we have parents who pay out of district fees for their children to be a part of the school district, and what might those?
The only time we have out of district fees is if it's a senior whose parents have, for whatever reason, had to relocate and they want to finish out their senior year, and there is a fee structure that they have to pay to continue in the school for their senior year.
Okay, and what kind of impact does this have on our school?
The question was about, well, you probably heard her question about having any of our students whose parents pay for their children to be in our school district, and Ms. Ante was sharing that that is only true if a child has been in our school district in their senior year, their parents move, but to give them an opportunity to complete their high school senior year in place, they pay a fee structure to finish that academic year as a senior at the high school they've been in.
Okay. It sounds like to me that since they're seniors, it's probably the impact is minimal. How would the numbers change if we quit allowing internal transfers of Hoover students? And I'm not talking about teachers' children's, because I think if we stop allowing that, I think we lose quality educators. But do we have a significant number of internal transfers within the schools?
I will get those numbers exactly of internal transfers, and again, Student Services can provide that for us, and if you want to reach out to me or we can communicate in whatever way you want us to post that, it'll be fine. The only internal transfers I'm aware of are those situations where there may be an extenuating circumstance with a child, for example, who's experienced excessive ongoing bullying, and for the protection of the well-being of a child, that child may have been relocated for protection purposes. So there are some of, I won't say there's none of that, but it's very minimum.
And I was just curious. I didn't know what those numbers were and if they would make any impact.
Very inconsequential.
Okay.
Very inconsequential. I'm only aware of just a handful of those circumstances.
Well, I just wanted to thank you. I know you're taking on a very difficult challenge. You have all different sorts of opinions here, but we really appreciate your transparency and your openness to discuss this with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think maybe our last. Yes.
I'm Suzanne Everhart, and I have a 7th grader at Baird and a sophomore at Spain Park. And I was just curious if there was anything that you are willing to say right now is off the table in terms of discussion. I know you said you don't want to move high schoolers. Is that completely off the table? I'm just curious if, when I go home, if I'm going to have to report that there is the possibility that my high schooler can stay at Spain Park, but if we get rezoned, then I'm going to have my middle schooler, who is a JAG, big time, is going to have to be a buck. Is there anything that's absolutely off the table you're saying right now?
Well, so what I'm not willing to do is get painted in a corner and have to come back later and you say to me, but you said. So I want to use great caution and care in responding to that. I again want to say to you, I realize the importance of, first of all, once our students get at the senior level, at the high school level, how difficult it is to look at them and say, I need you to now move from Spain Park to Hoover, from Hoover to Spain Park. I understand that. I also understand how difficult it is for a parent thinking my middle schooler may be headed in a different feeder zone than another child of mine. And we've had parents who've come up and said, you know, I have 4 kids. Please don't have 2 headed this way and 2 headed that way. And all I can say to you definitively is that I got it, I hear you, and I respect that, and we're going to do everything we can to nominally disrupt your world and your life. But before we, as I asked our community in this meeting before we started, you know, give us a chance to develop this, and then we can really see it, and then we can really question, share, and talk about what about that just doesn't make sense.
I do have one other comment. It's kind of a follow-up. I was going to mention it before Paige offered her last question. I am completely willing, before I make this, to consider the source that it is coming from my children. On the table, enough said.
Okay.
So, we are a smaller school who is a feeder school. I am a huge Spain Park advocate, so please, Dr. G, know that, first of all. But we do not have sports championships, and for some people in this community, that is an issue. Not for my family, but there are some people who feel like their children, friends of mine, will not have the same sporting opportunities at Hoover that they might have at the smaller Spain Park. I think that they should be coming to Spain Park for other reasons, not that our sporting is bad, but my children come home and say, oh, so-and-so lives in Russet Woods, but they now come to Spain Park. So my question, I guess I just wanted to make the statement since Paige already asked the question, but I feel like if Barry is at capacity essentially, that maybe we should look closely at the numbers of exceptions, because my children seem to have the impression, again, my children, I get it, that there are many children coming into our zone because they want to have perhaps more opportunities on an athletic team that they feel like they will not have at another zone, and that transfer is allowing to happen. Just what they feel like is happening. So.
And Dr. Robbins, that's something you and I can look at. I'm not aware of that, and you know, we'll be happy to take a look at that. Okay, I think our last spokesperson for the evening.
I'm Dan Fulton. I'm a retired teacher, government teacher, and I have been able to, in the last couple of years, attend just about every Board of Education meeting. And I just wanted to say that Dr. Murphy and the entire Board of Education have just been making a super effort to make sure that we have the greatest schools in the state, really quality schools, and making a dedicated effort to make sure the needs of each and every student are met. And they spend many, many extra hours to make sure that we have the very finest schools in Hoover. I just wanted to make a point, and I've lived on Harvard Avenue since 1956. And I was 27 years with Birmingham City Schools and department head, government civics teacher. I've been very disappointed in our city council and in our mayor in the, what I would really call, unfortunate lack of support of our schools. In 2008, for example, the city council in the city of Hoover provided $7.5 million to the schools. 2007, $7.5 million. In 2006, $7.1 million. And since 2009, the city has only provided $2 million per year. In this last financial report of the city, that represents only 1.61% of all the expenses, that's all they're giving to the schools. Now, I remember when the schools were started, we had a referendum And most of the folks said, no, we want to stay in the county. City Council came back and said, no, we are going to start the schools, and we pledge, we promise to strongly support the Hoover schools. Believe us, we will back the schools. Now, they have reneged on that promise. They have reneged on that promise. And I plead for you to please come to the council meetings. They meet the first Monday and the third Monday of every month, 6 o'clock at City Hall. You will have an opportunity to speak. Council President Jack Wright will give you an opportunity to speak. Please call on them to provide additional support for the Hoover schools. They can do that. Please call on them to do that. Now, if they are not going to be friends of education, if they say, we don't care, we can't do anything, then as I said, I'm a government teacher. We have an election in August 2016, and we will vote on who serves on the city council and who serves as mayor of the city of Hoover. So if you're not satisfied with this council, if you're not satisfied with Mayor Gary Ivey, then you need to let them know when you vote in August of 2016. I know how I'm going to vote. Now let me just say one more thing. For the city of schools to do any construction, they will have to have additional funding. That will have to come from the city of Hoover. Now, just a few days ago, I talked to the president of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Their new Gardendale High School, you know, they're fussing about it since Gardendale has broken away. That is a wonderful facility, but that costs $60 million. Now, can Hoover afford another high school? Yes, they can. They can. But it will be expensive. It will be $60 million. Now, the Board of Education has been running deficits several years, is that correct, Dr. Burke? They will have to have additional revenue. And we're going to have to call on the city of Hoover to keep their promise. They gave birth to this school system. Don't let us down. Support our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you for coming tonight. I want to thank you for sharing what you have said to us tonight is value. What you've said to us tonight is important. And I know that they may be wanting to close the church here pretty quickly, but I'll hang around for just a minute. If there's something that you wanted to share or say and you just weren't that comfortable coming to the mic, I'll be glad to spend a few minutes, but they may run us out of here. I don't know. I am very grateful to the Metropolitan Church of God. What a lovely facility, and so grateful to the church and to the administrators of the church for allowing us to be here. Thank you so much.
It's nice to meet you.
Okay, then.
Well,
I'm with you, man.
Oh, I
appreciate it. I wrote down those dates and everything.
Oh, okay,
And I got a big
absolutely.
mouth.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Do come to the council meetings.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I will.